that's totally relevant to my interests, and I think it's relevant to the Me Too movement. You know,
Hmm.
the Me Too movement, in some ways, it's about public accountability rather than, say, going through a legal system. And on one hand, I don't think that it should be so hard to say, like, that's not great. Like, that is not the best thing that should be happening. Like, we shouldn't be having to rely on, the public square and canceling in order to get like justice for people who's faced like, sexual assault. And it could be abused. Like, it is like conservatives like clutch their pearls and are like, oh, I'm afraid for my sons. And it's like, yeah, I mean, you do have a point. Like, there's a reason to be afraid. Like, in principle, it could be abused. People could advocate for disproportionate punishments, and people could lie and slander. Right?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
especially, yeah.
are coming from. Like, women are coming from this place where like the legal system wasn't designed to deal with these sorts of concerns.
Hmm.
So it's their like last resort. So we shouldn't just blindly celebrate it and say there's nothing to fear. So then the question remains, so then how do we like avoid aligning ourselves with the conservatives?
Yeah, yeah, and I think also what this reminds me of is when the whole like war on terror was happening, and or like surveillance, when the NSA surveillance thing was happening, they said, well, if you don't have anything to hide, don't worry about it. And so I think a lot of these concerns are dismissed in the same way, like they're saying, oh, well, then just don't be an abuser and you don't need to worry about Me Too. But social interactions can sometimes be very sticky, and like, how can we tell if a guy, like, maybe you might interpret a guy's behavior as something abusive when maybe they're just really socially awkward, or like especially in sexual situations, right? And so I think there can be muddy areas, and we can acknowledge that,
Yeah.
uh, without, without being like, yes, we are also, buying into this whole, whatever, like
Yeah.
conservative traditionalist framework.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's totally true. And like, like not just in sexual situations, like I think in professional situations where
Mhm.
where the lines aren't clear or queer for that matter.
Yeah, I feel like
Uh,
grad school is a great example of where that happens.
like, like a lot of times you have these like, it's not just a professional relationship with people you're working with, it's also like a personal relationship. They become your friends. And
Mhm.
it's why students are pushing, and I think rightfully, for like strict guidelines in the department of what is appropriate in those relationships. So because it's easy to like misinterpret what people are doing, or just be like, uh, be extremely like
Yeah.
tense and like super hyper aware of if you think someone is crossing a boundary, and maybe being overly sensitive to that. When you feel
Yeah.
particularly vulnerable, like you could be easily dominated because there's no institutional restraints, then you're going to be extra sensitive if someone sort of crosses a boundary, even in a sort of minimal way.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, with the legal system, like I think it totally makes sense that a sort of public accountability thing would come to light in this. I also think that part of it is that like new progressive movements are more libertarian in nature than like authoritarian left, in the sense that I think people don't trust like the traditional political legal institutions to solve their problems anymore. But then the problem is of course, like, you can still reproduce the same carceral or like retributive mechanisms that the legal system is in place for anyway.